and I'm very honored to be here with many of the people that make the work that we do here at the Holocaust Center possible. We have our executive director, member of our executive board, my vice chairs here, without which none of this would be possible. I'm going to do something I don't do very often when I speak publicly. I'm going to try to fully embrace what Yom HaShoah, I believe, is all about, but also try to finish up and explain why I think it's so important that we're all here. Like many of you, I lit my candles today because I am the child of survivors. Now, to me, and I know for many of you, with whatever our childhood was like, it was the greatest blessing having my parents. They really were the most incredible people I ever knew. And we all have our flaws, and they had theirs. But I think for people like me, for those of us that are children of survivors, the memory of our parents, the things they told us, the lives that they lived, and who they lived it for, it just was a little more in technicolor for us than it might have been for some of our friends and other people we knew. Because I knew, growing up in the 70s, my classmates, none of their parents were like mine. None of them acted like mine. None of them had the same belief systems like mine. None of them had the same kind of strength that mine exhibited at all times. And they weren't quite as hard to make sure that we got somewhere in life. Everyone wants their kids to succeed. I'm a proud father of 3 beautiful daughters. Many of you I know have wonderful children. We all want what's best for our children. But when you're the child of a survivor, they don't want you to do well just for you. They're thinking about everyone else that never had that opportunity. And the stories that we would hear growing up were just different from anyone around us. I'll never forget coming home to my dad and saying, "This kid tried to beat me up today in school, and he hit me here, and he hit me there." And my parents weren't like a lot of the wonderful survivors we have here. They never wanted to tell their story. I learned it over spending a lifetime with them, but never did they want to share it. And it was at moments like that that I learned the story. Because my father told me, "Son, one kid on one day tried to beat you up. Every day I went to school, every single day, the only 2 Jews in our school was me and my brother. They beat me every day. I went to school with a slingshot. Son, don't ever start a fight. Make sure you always finish it." That's what a survivor tells you as they go through. My father didn't have it easy. He didn't have any friends growing up. So he spent his time in a printing press. And he would hang out in the rafters and he'd watch the printing press run. And they tried to chase him out, but they couldn't. He was a little kid running around. Didn't bother them, so they let him go. One day the printing press broke, and they brought in a mechanic. And the mechanic said, "The only way to fix this is with a part that we can't get for 6 months from Munich." Printing press closed. And my father came down from the rafters and he said, "I can fix it." They said, "Kid, if you can fix it, you can stay here anytime you want." And lo and behold, my 14-year-old father fixed the printing press. And he had the run of the place from then on. When the Nazis came to his town, his school announced that they would be there the next day. And a teacher told the class, "They'll really like us better if we take care of the 2 Jews that are in here now." My father got away, his brother didn't. They beat him senseless. I'll never forget sitting at a Shabbos table and my father telling me the story. When the Nazis came, my father did two things. One, he printed a birth certificate for himself, his brothers, and other members of his family. His father went off to war with the Polish army, and he had no idea what happened to him. He wouldn't see him again for 11 more years when he met him in Brooklyn. That night, after they printed their birth certificates, they went to the teacher's house that told them to get beaten up. And my father, with his teeth grinding, told me, "My only regret, Alan, is that the tar wasn't hotter when we tarred and feathered him." That's who my father was. No one would mess with him. When he came back after the Holocaust ended, all his neighbors came around and they said, "Oh my God, we didn't know. We didn't know. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know about the death camps." He said, "Listen, you all tried to kill me when I was 6 years younger, and I knew how to handle myself then. I've had 6 years to prepare for you. How easy you think it's going to be now? New rule on the block. When I'm in my house, you can come out and play. When I come out, you go in. I don't see any of you here." Strongest man I ever knew. My mother had a very different life. On the top of her roof was a Jewish star, a little shtetl, a general store. Her and her sisters and her brothers, they would often talk about how wonderful their life was before the Shoah. Had some farm animals, sold groceries, very happy people. The night the Nazis came, her father and her oldest brothers were taken and murdered in the graves they dug for themselves that night, never to be seen again. There was another family that the Nazis took over, and they killed the father. The mother and daughter had no place to go. They came to my grandmother's house, a grandmother I never met, and asked for a place to stay. And so they were let in, and the daughter lived with my mother. Now, all the time growing up, I met my mother's sisters, and one of them was her sister Ruti. And for years, I knew her as Aunt Ruti. But I didn't know she wasn't a blood relation. She was every bit as much of a sister. My mother and Ruti were taken to camp together. They made bullets, they made yarn. My mother was pulled in front of Mengele. She was stripped naked. She wasn't picked. Luckiest thing that ever happened to her. She was such a strong-willed woman that she was too stubborn to ever take no for an answer. And so, as the war was ending, and my mother and Ruti were marching in wood clogs for 16 miles at a time through the snow in the winter with no winter clothes, and their compatriots would fall and die in the snow on the march, Ruti fell and said, "I can't go on." She was ready to die. My mother was too stubborn, so she carried her for 16 miles to the next spot. Now, my mother never told me that story. Thank God Ruti did. That's how many of those stories come. Eventually, my mother came to America, met my father. And that was a great life they built here. But I want to leave you with one last story from my mother that I believe is the most poignant one for you to hear today. And it was after my father had passed away. It was after we had grown up. I was married. She was living alone at the house. And I would come regularly to check on her and make sure she was okay. She was older by now. And one day, helping her organize her stuff, I found a shoebox. And in the shoebox are thousands upon thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. And I showed the shoebox to my mother. And I said, "Mom, what are you doing with a shoebox full of cash? We're not drug dealers. What are you doing? We have bank accounts. You know how to control them. What are you doing?" And my mom, who had educated me and spoken to me my whole life, says one more lesson she had to teach me. And frankly, I'm not going to learn it. And what she said was, "You see this beautiful house? Do you see our beautiful cars? Nice jewelry I'm wearing? Beautiful businesses we own? In a second, it could be gone and they could be coming for us. Not me. If I see it coming, before they know it, we'll be gone. And we'll leave all of this behind." She was in her late 70s by then, maybe early 80. Had grandchildren, wealth, homes. She was ready to pack up and run the moment she saw them coming. But I am my son's, my mother's son. And I remember my father too. And this is my lesson to each of you today. I will not run. And I'll be damned if I let any of you run either. Because we've made our life in this country. We helped build it. We built this state. We've collected Nobel Prizes for our work here. We've made the economy through it. We've written the music. We've drawn the plans for the architects. We've created the inventions. We created Google. We've done so much, and we're proud of all of it, and we love our country. And we love our fellow Americans. But we will not stand and be chased out again. And we are not the same Jews we were during the Shoah. Everyone seems to love weak, dead Jews. But we're just not them anymore. And I'm sorry if they don't like us, but we're not going anywhere. Thank you very much.